It's a crossover edition of Locked On Cougars and Locked On TCU. And Darrion, renewal of a rivalry that's existed for quite a while. How are the TCU Horned Frogs feeling about playing spoiler?
That's the only hope they have left.
All right, let's get into it.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars and Locked On Horned Frogs. I'm Jake Hatch, host of Locked On Cougars, covering all things BYU, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. That across from me digitally is my good friend Darrion Gray, host of Locked On Horned Frogs. And Darrion, you're relatively new to this new beat, but I think Cougar fans are going to be very excited to get to know you.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think we had a little conversation before about the rivalry and the history, and it's like, okay, I'm stepping into this, and this is my first time here, and I'm excited about what it could be. I'm excited about the energy, at least what comes before the game, because I think when we get to those 60 minutes, it's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, so make sure you subscribe, rate, and review these shows wherever you get them. We're proud to be part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is America's #1 sports podcast network, and thank you to all of you for making them your first listen of the day. And as always, subscribe, rate, review, share with your family and friends, and help us keep our jobs, as Drake Toll likes to say. All right, so Darrion, I want to take you back to October 14th, 2023. Now, you're probably wondering, what in the world does that date mean for you? Well, in my world, it's the date of my younger brother's birthday, and I can vividly remember texting him that day, but it was also the last time the TCU Horned Frogs and BYU Cougars played a football game against one another. It was down in Fort Worth. It was BYU's first year as members of the Big 12 Conference, and I was doing a Cougar pregame show for my radio station, the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah. And news came out that week that TCU was going to turn to a redshirt freshman quarterback by the name of Josh Hoover. I can tell you this, Darrion, as we were previewing that game, I'm like, I have no idea what this game's going to entail, but with a redshirt freshman quarterback making his first career start, I think BYU's got this in the bag. How wrong BYU fans and myself were as Josh Hoover introduced himself to the college football world in absolutely electric fashion.
Well, this sounds a lot like today. It might not be October 14th, but it does sound like a game in which many people would say that BYU has it in the bag. Everybody is predicting BYU to win. I'm sure you'll do it when we get to our predictions. I'll tell you right now, I'm doing it when we get to our predictions. But I think that the way for TCU to pull off an upset is to have a replica of that game where Hoover's going to have to go crazy. He had over 450 yards in that matchup. He may have to do it again. This offense is built to win via Hoover, period. And I like the running backs that they have. I like the trio of Payne and Barnes and Battle. I think they're talented. I don't think that the offensive line opens up holes for them consistently enough, but I like the running backs they have. Despite hearing that, please understand, this offense is going to go as Josh Hoover goes. Not just because he is the quarterback, not just because he's the face of the team, but because he is, in the passing attack, is the method that Kendall Briles wants to attack defenses through. So if you're going to have a good game, if you're going to win, I said it on Wednesday's episode, you're going to need an all-timer out of Josh Hoover. You're going to need something like 2023.
Okay, so that brings up a point. I know that you wanted to talk about Bear Bachmeier. We'll get to him just momentarily because obviously he's the quarterback on the other side. And speaking of BYU, but give me a sense. And obviously I watch TCU from afar. I like to watch a lot of Big 12 football, and I've seen a handful of games, especially this last one against Iowa State, because obviously, it was a bit of a crazy game. But you mentioned the fact that TCU goes as Josh Hoover goes. What's made the Horned Frogs so, I guess, reliant on him, I guess is probably the best term to use. Like, why is it that he is the focal point?
I want to answer this question responsibly because I think there's a lot of things that go into it. And I think if you just highlight one, it can come off a tad bit disrespectful. So I'll just try to give all three. Okay. One, they can't run the ball. Just flat out. You can't run the ball, not consistently. You've been able to see it in flashes, but they don't run the ball consistently. They don't attempt to run the ball consistently either. So when you ask, why are they so reliant on the passing attack? You could say because they're one-dimensional, but it's also because that's what Kendall Briles wants to do. Like he wants to run, or excuse me, he wants to pass the football. And then lastly, Josh Hoover's a good quarterback. And when you have a good quarterback, a lot of times teams will rely on that. I don't think that's a college football only thing. Don't think it's a Big 12 thing. I think it's football, period. If your quarterback is good, a lot of times, especially if he's good and experienced, a lot of times people will just put so much weight on the quarterback, probably unjustly. And that this is what you get. You have a quarterback who determines the direction of the team.
Okay, so in that case, it makes me, I guess, from my vantage point, think that BYU's defense is going to be licking their chops. And I know they're licking their wounds a little bit because it was a blowout loss to Texas Tech this past weekend, Darrion. And Cougar fans are a little bit down on this team, obviously, because they don't want to see a repeat of what happened a season ago where they dropped back-to-back games, ultimately cost themselves a chance to play in the Big 12 title game. But if I'm Jay Hill, speaking of BYU's defensive coordinator, I got to be thinking, all right, if they don't really want to run the ball consistently, we'll make sure that that's not an option for them and put this game on the arm of Josh Hoover and trust that our defense learned its lesson a couple of seasons ago and win the ball game that way. And I'm saying there's worse ways to go about that. But in some ways, I'm also in my mind thinking it can't be that simple. There's got to be like a trick coming. And I guess just a counter to that from TCU.
If they're going to run the football, and if you allow them to run, I would like to believe that Kendall Briles is going to keep doing it. Okay. But I think they will run it. They just, I don't think that they have the heart to stick it through if you're going to stop it early. So I think they will quickly say, all right, now it's on Hoover. But no, it's not really a trick. And I think that those linebackers that you have are built to stop the run. So even if this wasn't a one-dimensional offense, this would still, in my opinion, lean towards being a one-dimensional output this specific week because BYU has a really talented linebacking duo that can stop the run. But I would like to see what they do in the passing attack. That'll be interesting. But I want to flip something over to you. BYU's coming off of a bad loss. And I had this conversation with a guest on my show, Sarah Smith, who comes on every Wednesday. And we talked about who was the biggest loser from last week. She said TCU, and I said BYU, because I think that BYU had a huge opportunity with a victory, right? Like if they beat Texas Tech, they're able to distance themselves from Tech. They have a game versus Cincinnati. Is it next? Well, it has to be next week because we play Cincinnati the week after. So they have a game against Cincinnati the week after this. There was a chance where you could really wrap things up going into that last second to last game. Unfortunately, not the case. So I felt like BYU was the biggest losers, but TCU season is practically over. So these are two teams who lost a lot last week looking for a bounce back performance, but I don't know where the mentality of BYU is as they attempt to get that bounce back.
Let's put it this way. BYU saying all the right things. And speaking of coaches and players and media sessions this week, Darrion, they've been very clear that we learned our lesson from a season ago. We understand that we can't afford to have back-to-back losses. Now, I've used the phrase on my podcast this week, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I think I got that one. It might have been backwards, but you get what I'm saying.
Something like that.
We're gonna learn a lot about BYU and their mentality and capability of shaking off a really rough loss to Texas Tech on Saturday night, because if they allow it to linger, which did happen last year when they lost to Kansas and ultimately bled over into that loss against Arizona State, they will either prove that they've learned their lesson, or we're going to be like, all right, you're the same old team that you were a season ago. And you mentioned the fact that they lost a lot, because had they won that football game, they were essentially 1, maybe 2 wins away from, as you mentioned, locking up a place in the Big 12 title game, maybe being top 5 in the country, an at-large bid in the college football playoff. It was all there for BYU. Now, I will also add the caveat that despite the loss, BYU still has every goal capable of what they want to accomplish in front of them. It's just they cashed in their mulligan, to use the golf term, and now they have to obviously handle their business moving forward. But that's where I kind of want to dig in a little more on TCU, because you mentioned TCU season is all but over after they lost to Iowa State. But you mentioned they play BYU, they play Cincinnati. The Horned Frogs, they're going to be a thorn in the side and play spoiler for multiple weeks down the stretch run of the season here. And I want to dig more into that, and we'll get to that momentarily, all right? Coming up right here on a crossover edition of Locked On Horned Frogs and Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with our friends over at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if they miss the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks and quite literally everything in between, it feels like. Plus, you even combine those live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up to play and play your game with FanDuel. Once again, $300 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. It's all courtesy of FanDuel, as they are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Horned Frogs and Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I'm Locked On Cougars host Jake Hatch. That's Locked On Horned Frogs host Darrion Gray. And Darrion, I mentioned the fact that TCU has the capability of playing spoiler in multiple instances down the stretch run of this season. So you asked me the question about BYU's mentality, obviously going into this, coming off that loss, and how from my vantage point, I hope they bounce back. But give me a sense of what you feel about the Horned Frogs, as that, their chance of winning a Big 12 title went out the window with that loss to Iowa State, unless something completely unforeseen goes down. But give me a sense of how the Horned Frogs have responded this week leading up to this game.
It feels like business as usual.
Okay.
So we're recording this right now. For some reason, they didn't post the press conference this week, so I'm not able to read into tones and things of that nature. I can only read what is being posted, right? So I want to put that out there, where tones are a big deal when talking about where somebody is at, inflections, what the body language is like. I haven't gotten all of that out of Sonny Dykes or the players this week after the game. So I'll tell you what I think it should be. I gave two options for TCU going into the last month of the season. You could be streakers or you could be spoilers. And honestly, you were looking to be both, because if you were streaking, you were also spoiling along the way.
Mm-hmm.
The odds of streaking, they're gone now. You lost that first game. You're not going to be in the Big 12 championship, but that doesn't mean that your season is over in the sense of what you can make an impact in the Big 12 or where you can make an impact in the Big 12. You play BYU, you play Houston, you play Cincinnati. And I mean, people, I feel like, have kind of phased Houston out of those conversations after losing to West Virginia, but you face three teams that are hoping to make some sort of noise in the Big 12 title picture. You can still be a spoiler. It starts every week. If you can't spoil BYU, try to go spoil Houston next week. Yep. You can't spoil Houston, you try to go spoil Cincinnati if they still have something to play for. But I think there's spoiling and there's also desperation, Jake. I think that the fans, I can't get a beat on where the decision makers are, but the fans are having a lot of questions about whether or not Sonny Dykes should be secure in his job. And I think that if you beat BYU, you're good, right? Because this is a game you're not supposed to win. You're not supposed to win this game, and it's something that he hasn't been able to do in the past couple of years. Winning the big game, not the big one, but the big game, has not been a strong suit of the Horned Frogs over the last few years under Sonny Dykes. If he's able to win this one, though, this big game, I think he kind of saves his job. And I know that it seems crazy to say that about one game, but this would be so improbable. They don't play well on the road. They haven't played well against big-time teams, or they haven't closed well. Matter of fact, if they beat BYU, I'm going to have to go and amend this on tomorrow's episode. Because I said this, I forgot to add this. Yeah. They're going to have to close a game out against a team that's known for closing games out. Sure. That would be extremely impressive. This game, I didn't even realize how special a win could be. I laid out some of it, but I think there's a little meat left on the bone there. But yeah, well, it's a little desperate in my opinion.
Okay, so on that premise, any Cougar fan or Horned Frog fan who remembers the Mountain West era in particular for these two programs remembers the rivalry these two enjoyed, and it was a relatively short span. It was 2005 to essentially 2012, if I recall correctly. I think that final game was BYU's first year in independence or second year, and they actually played a neutral site game, actually at AT&T Stadium, where the Cowboys played down there in Arlington, where the Big 12 title game is held. But they had some absolutely epic battles, Darrion, and this is the first time since 2009 that TCU will be in Provo. So the Cougar fans and Horned Frogs fans of a certain age will remember how electric this rivalry is. And if you want to reignite that immediately, do exactly what you just said. beat BYU in Provo, give the Cougars their second loss, and send the Big 12 into all kinds of spirals. Because when you have a two-loss team in BYU, a two-loss team in Utah, two-loss Texas, it could absolutely create all kinds of chaos. So I completely understand why TCU, that's got to be the mentality coming into this game, because that's exactly the mentality. If it was the flip side, if BYU was in that role, I would fully expect that from the Cougars.
Yeah, no, I think it has to be. At the end of the day, you have to find something to motivate you. And I think that is a perfect motivation. Let's go out here and ruin somebody's season. Now, I stand against hating. I'll be honest with you. I stand against hating. That's not something that I put out there. But this is the most hate-infused take that you'll hear me give. Okay. You got to go ruin somebody's season because yours isn't turning out the way you want, right? Yep. Like, BYU is a team that may be in the Big 12 championship game. In TCU, you can stop that.
Yeah.
Simple and plain. Simple and plain. And this is a game that's a big-time matchup. This will be, I think that it has the chance to break your back, and I think it has the chance to really mend everything that's been going on in your season. You've had some rough losses. You're coming off of what I consider to be your worst loss because it happened at home. And that's the one that's the most disappointing, is that it happened in front of your fans. It happened in a moment in which you had to win. Those other games, it would have been nice to win, but because you lost them, you forced yourself into a situation in which you had to win. And now you're not there no more. It's over.
Well, and that
BYU gets it done.
Yeah, and that would be a really crazy scenario, because you mentioned the fact you're going to ruin somebody's season. Well, that would ruin BYU season. And I got no problem saying that, Darrion, because it would have Cougar fans saying, see, same old thing as last year. You guys you lose your first game and all of a sudden you go into a spiral. And that would be, I think, worst case scenario in so many different ways for this BYU team, because you mentioned the fact they've got this rep as a team who knows how to finish games, and they had done that. They had come back in 3 different Big 12 games to come from behind, beating Colorado, Arizona, and Iowa State in comeback fashion. And I think a lot of the sheen of that 8-0 start for BYU, if they were to lose this game, comes right off, and Cougar fans would be like, okay, well, I guess we can write them off right now.
And I don't think they should do that. Right. I mean, well, I guess if you lose this game, then you probably should do that. But as it stands right now, I don't feel like it's at that point. I think that the Texas Tech game was a huge loss, and it was a big one. And I think that the tumble that you saw in the standings makes sense, because you did have some come from behind games. You had some closer ones. You're not, just widely beating everybody. But I still think this is a very talented team. They're one of the best run and pass defenses, and obviously one of the best defenses in general in the conference. You're looking at a team that has LJ Martin, and we haven't gotten to him for real. And I'm sure we'll get into it when we get into predictions and things of that nature, because my key kind of goes with that. But you have somebody like LJ Martin who could be an absolute terror for TCU. And then you have the Bear. You have the Bear, the freshman sensation, Agent 47, whatever it is that you want to call him. I called him Agent 47 for so long that I had to say his name one time on the show. I completely forgot it. I just been calling him Agent 47. But
have you heard the new one, by the way?
No, I didn't. What's the new one?
Bear Force 1.
I like that, though.
Yes,
I like that. I like that a lot. Nike should look into that. Look into that, and if they do, I like my check.
There you go. All right. So you want to talk about predictions. I've got 3 things I'm looking at from my vantage point. I'm sure you got yours as well, Darrion. Mm-hmm. We'll get to those momentarily, because we do need to talk about LJ Martin. We need to talk a little more about Bear Bachmeier. I want to talk more about Josh Hoover, and one of my personal favorites, Bud Clark. We'll talk about all those guys and more coming up next on this crossover edition of Locked On Cougars and Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward. Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow, with over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. The real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting on projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. If you need parts fast for a project, they have next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. Any of you who work in the trades know how incredible that is. And the best part is their Trademaster perks, like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process smoother along the way. So join the free Trade Master program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free. And once again, use the promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com using the promo code SHCollege5. It's all courtesy of Supply House. Real people and real service. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars and Locked On Horned Frogs your first listen of the day. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and continue to help us make the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 podcast, sports podcast network. I should clarify that. But Darrion, as we look forward to this game on Saturday night, it looked like at the outset of the week, by the way, that the weather in Provo was going to finally turn. We've had an incredible fall where the weather's been awesome. Quite frankly, we're in mid-November, Darrion. It's been like 60 degrees as a high, and that doesn't happen this time of year up this way.
You know, I'm from Texas, so I was 60 degrees. I'm like, I don't know, it's a little cold out there.
This time of year, Darrion, I'm surprised there's not snow on the ground. So it's been a great fall along the Wasatch Front here. And TCU fans, if they are making the trip, it may be a little chilly because it's a late night. It's 8:15 Mountain Time. It's 9:15 Central on the kickoff, but the environment should be absolutely electric. I'm expecting Cougar fans will show up in droves as they have all year long, 64,000 plus at full throat. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of purple-clad Horned Frog fans in the stands as well. But as you look forward to this matchup, who are I guess you already talked about Josh Hoover, but who else on the TCU roster you think can make maybe that impact that could, in theory, put them over the top?
Devin Deal has done it a lot. Right. So that's an edge defender that you're going to have to look out for. I think he's really talented. He's great at getting after the quarterback. But with the LJ Martin aspect of it all, I'm looking at Caleb Elarms-Orr. He's a tackling machine, and he's not one of those tackling machines that makes all his plays 7-8 yards down the field. I think we've all seen those guys who look good in the stat box, but if you look at the actual game, it's not really representative of those numbers. No. Caleb Elarms-Orr, a linebacker, number 3, you're going to see him. He's going to be a guy who is an impact player, making plays near the line of scrimmage, as well as out towards the flats. If you're running, you don't see him in coverage that much, but if you're running outside, you'll see him around that area. So he's a player who I think is an impact guy. And then if you're going to go offense, Josh Hoover, always, like I said, is going to live and die by what Hoover is able to do. And Eric McAllister is the dynamic wide receiver that he's going to target the most. If I'm not mistaken, and I hope I'm not just throwing this out there, I think he's had 100 or more yards in either back-to-back games or 2 of the last 3. I'll check that for right now, but he's been an absolute force. So, yeah, McAllister's had 100 yards in the last 2 games, and 3 of the last 3 of the last 4 games in back-to-back games, he's had 100.
Well, he's an absolute baller, and I was going to bring him up if you didn't, because McAllister, he's been a highlight reel. Trust me, I've seen plenty of highlights of his from just whether it's been on social media or watching TCU play. That's fun. Okay, you mentioned the fact you wanted to talk about a little bit about LJ Martin. Now, I'm sure there are TCU fans, and I'll just get out in front of this right now, who are wondering, well, what's the health of BYU star running back? Well, that's a great question. He is not on the injury report. The initial injury report came out on Wednesday night, and he's not listed there. So he is expected to play in this game. Now, that does not mean that the shoulder he injured against Iowa State, Darrion, is 100%. And you could tell at points during that Texas Tech game, he kind of looked in his eyes on the replay. There was some pain there in that shoulder. And as a running back, you take a lot of shots on those shoulder pads. I'm expecting with another week of rehab and getting all kinds of treatment on it, he should be better than he was against Texas Tech. But I still have questions about his overall effectiveness, leading me to think that from my vantage point, you talk about Josh Hoover's importance to this offense for TCU. Well, if it's no LJ Martin or he's limited in any fashion, it means it's the Bear versus the Hoover, and it could be a quarterback duel for the ages.
Yeah, no. Do Bears have Hoovers? Is that a thing?
Hey, we're just having fun with play on words here. We're just rocking and rolling with it.
I wonder. I think they do. And if they do, I'm dropping it 3 times in tomorrow's episode. But I'm sorry, I didn't got lost on the question. What was the question?
So yeah, but I just like look at because you look at the importance you mentioned of Josh Hoover as TCU's kind of linchpin to their offense. If there is LJ Martin limited in any fashion for BYU, much like he was against Texas Tech, that puts more of this offensive responsibility on a guy like Bear Bachmeier. And that kind of leads me to think that these two quarterbacks could end up putting on what you hope is a duel for the ages, where they're just kind of slinging the ball all over the yard and entertaining us who are watching at home.
And I think that would help. TCU's defense is actually pretty good. So I want to see, I'm a competitor, right? So at the end of the day, I like seeing good on good. So I hope that we have a healthy LJ Martin. We have a guy who's able to carry the rock maybe, I don't know, 17 or so times, right? Someone who's healthy enough to do that, because I would really like to see what he's able to do against a defense that has allowed very little 10+ yard rushes, against a defense that has really talented linebackers. That would be fun. If it's not what we get, and it does end up being Bear versus Hoover, if that is the case, I do think that leans towards TCU. I think that's good, because I also feel like LJ is such a talented back, such a guy who can spearhead an offense, and Bear is still a freshman, a talented and gritty freshman, but still a freshman. If you could heat him up, I think you could force some mistakes out of him. And I think you're going to have to keep this game pretty low scoring. So I think that if it is all on Bear, I'm not going to say it gives TCU a good chance to win, but it does give them a better chance to win, in my opinion.
Well, and I think anybody who watched that Texas Tech game would point exactly to that, Darrion. You put this on a freshman quarterback because he made some mistakes against Texas Tech. And to the Red Raiders' credit, who I think are a cut above literally everybody else in the conference, they look very much the part of the best team in the league. They made BYU pay, and these were mistakes, by the way. Bears made mistakes before the season, but BYU's been able to wriggle off that hook because obviously they're 8-1, and they've been able to find ways around that. But Texas Tech proved that, okay, if you can cash in on BYU's mistakes, they are beatable. And I think that's, if TCU wants to play spoiler, they got to come into this game and they've got to muck it up, and they've got to make it ugly and force some turnovers, force them into a bad throw or a strip sack or the like. And that would be interesting to see. Now, I will also say this, BYU, they've got to find Josh Hoover and avoid a repeat of 2023, because if you allow him to get going, much like they did, because I can take you exactly where I was sitting at our studios at KSL Sports up in Salt Lake City, Darrion, to the very spot I was sitting at watching Josh Hoover carve up BYU, and I was absolutely just flabbergasted at what he was doing to BYU in that game, because he was just a relative unknown. But all he's done since then has proved to be one of the best and most durable quarterbacks in this league, in a league that's got really good quarterbacks. And BYU's got to be wary of him because they got torched the last time they saw him.
Yeah, and I've said it before. If he does it, if he has an all-timer, TCU can play spoiler. Right? And I think that is what you're going to have to do. I don't know if you'll be able to run the ball on BYU. I really don't. So I don't know if you're going to be able to stop BYU as well. Like, these are all questions.
Yeah.
But if Josh Hoover has that type of game, at worst, it's going to be more competitive than people believe. And I think there's a good chance you're able to win. If he goes for 400 yards, and let's be clear, if he's able to go for 400 yards and you're not throwing to catch up the whole game.
Sure. Yeah.
That's important too. Because he could throw 400 yards and you were down 21 points since the midpoint of the second quarter. And then those numbers don't really tell the true story. But if you're able to throw for 400 yards and the game is close, I think it could be a game that you win.
Yeah. So I'll just real quick, as I look at it, I think BYU's, as long as they take care of the football, they generate any semblance of a steady ground game. I'm not expecting it to be what it was before LJ Martin got hurt against Iowa State, because at that point, Darrion, BYU was number 10 in the country, averaging over 230 yards on the ground. I don't expect that same number. Now, if they get to that number, I think BYU runs away with a victory in this circumstance. But I think it's just, if BYU plays clean football, doesn't give TCU short fields and the like, the Cougars should be able to find a way to win this football game. And that's just the message to this BYU fan base right now, is for BYU, win and you're in. And that's got to be the whole mentality. No matter how it comes, just get the W.
Yeah, and I think they do. I think that BYU wins this game by about 10 points. They've had some moments where it feels like games aren't supposed to be as close as they are. TCU's had some moments where you feel like you were supposed to close the game and you didn't. So that's going to be a real interesting battle. Two teams who probably feel like the 60 minutes haven't been as complete as you would like them to be. I can't speak for how often that's the case for BYU, but it's very frequent for TCU that the fans feel that way. And I think the coaches and players feel that way too. It'll be interesting to see who gets the most out of their 60 minutes.
I agree. And I think Cougar fans are right there in cahoots in terms of, like you talking about, they have not seen a full 60-minute performance. It feels like from all three phases from BYU this season, despite an absolutely incredible 8-1 start, all things considered, Darrion. So you're right. Whoever takes advantage of the most opportunities in this game very likely comes out on top, and we'll see how it all shakes out on Saturday night. You said 10-point difference. I've kind of been thinking like 7 points. I think BYU gets the W by a touchdown, and we'll see how it all shakes out. But if Cougar fans want more of your work in the lead up to this game, where can they find you?
Locked on Horned Frogs. If you're an audio listener, Locked on Horned Frogs. If you're a video listener and watcher, Locked on Horned Frogs. It's here. All right. It's wherever you type, you go to Google, Locked on Horned Frogs. By this point, I think we all know to type in Locked on Horned Frogs. But like, that's where you need to go. So if you want to keep up with it, and if you're on the TCU side, I suggest you do the same, right? Look up Locked on Cougars. BYU is an absolute beast this year, and you want to know what you're looking for, go there. There's only so much that we do in the back and forth 30 minutes, but Jake is doing it every single day, boots on the ground. So check him out.
Like we are across the entire Locked On networks. Yeah, check out Locked On Cougars and Locked On Horned Frogs, wherever you get your podcast. By the way, I'm going to say it for our YouTube listeners right now, no matter for whichever channel you listen to, there's a little thumbs up icon right down here. Hit it. Simple as that. It helps the algorithm more than you actually could ever know. So all you got to do is like the show. And if you're listening to it in audio format, subscribe, leave us a rating and review. And as always, thank you for all y'all's support. Darrion, it's been a pleasure, my man. We'll see how it all goes down on Saturday night. All right.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right. For Darrion, I'm Jake. A big thank you to all of you once again for making Locked On Cougars and Locked On Horned Frogs your first listen of the day. Make sure once again, you subscribe, rate and review the show wherever you get it, and come back and be an everydayer right here on the Locked On Podcast Network.